Please, 1 second. Sorry. Oh, never
Okay.
mind.
So,
That's
hello,
gone.
dear digital Olympians, and we are ready to continue with our next session. And it's actually a very interesting one and special since it's dedicated to different visual to different visual methods and tools which can be used in digital marketing. And I'm very delighted to introduce you our speakers. And the first one will be Purna Virji, and she is actually from Microsoft team from Bing Ads, and now she is welcome to start. The flow is her.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be a part of this amazing event. So, I will kick it off by talking about how search is becoming more and more multi-sensory. So, let's kick it off with tangible, audible, and visual. So just you introduced me already. I am Purna. I'm the senior PPC training manager at Microsoft, and I'm a huge search nerd. So I'm very lucky that my job lets me travel all around the world talking about PPC, SEO, and voice search. I also write about these topics on lovely publications such as Search Engine Land, Moz, and Search Engine Watch. So I have a question. Do you guys know that how many of you have a smartphone? Most of you, right, in this room? So my iPhone, I have an iPhone, and it's okay to have an iPhone, even though I work for Microsoft. It's all friendly. But my iPhone has more processing power in it now than all of NASA had when it sent a man to the moon. Like, think about it. Technology is advancing at such rapid paces. You know, my cell phone actually has more processing power now than almost all of the consumer computers that were in existence in 1995, but even more so than in 2005, just 10 years ago. If you think about what huge shifts we're taking in just little periods of 10 years, which brings me to this sort of next point. If we take ourselves back 10 years, and if you imagine you're walking down the street, it's 2006, and you see somebody talking to themselves, what are you going to think? Your first thought is that this person's probably crazy. Bring yourself back 10 years forward, so in the present today, 2016, and if you saw somebody walking down the street talking to themselves, A, you probably wouldn't even notice them. And if you did, you would just think that, oh, they're probably talking on the phone. These little 10-year shifts in technology are changing not just the actual physical technology, but how we react to it, how we behave, how we understand. So let's start with looking at the three elements. The first one, we'll start with the visual. How many of you have ever interacted with a little map listing? Or have you bought anything off a shopping ad? Or I know we've all done this, right? We've watched those cooking videos on Facebook and convinced ourselves that it's super easy to go and make this like fancy dish in 5 minutes. And unfortunately, the reality never quite measures up. The truth is, in all these studies that were done, this is some stats from Pixelword Design's image research, they found that images are the most important deciding factor when making a purchase. Now, that's pretty major. And it's not surprising because this is think found behavior. We interact with an image if it has relevant, if we interact with content if it has relevant imagery. So let's take a look at some of the future trends that we're seeing. And certainly, when we're thinking about the future of visual, the first thing we think of is things like augmented reality and virtual reality. And yes, that's going to play a part. And it's going to change the way we shop as well. I want to show you this really short video. How cool was that, right? It changes the way you shop. I wish I had that at home, because one of the big issues we have as consumers is trying to figure out how things will look and feel in our house. I am the queen of buying sofas that are far too big for my house. And my husband will be like, I told you that was too big, but it just doesn't look that big in the store or in the really big showroom. So if I had something like this now, it would be a huge improvement. And it's not just in the home sector. For anybody who's a fan of fashion, Rebecca Minkoff is a really interesting brand to look at. At New York Fashion Week this fall, so back in September in New York, she did two really cool things. The first one was she had people download this augmented reality app called Zkit. And what it did was, as the models were walking down the runway in their perfectly skinny, tiny bodies, making the clothes look amazing, women in the audience could use that augmented reality app to see how the clothes would look on their body. Now that's absolutely brilliant, right? If you think about the problem that retail has, is that there's a 20 to 40% return rate. That's really huge. Imagine if 40% of all your clients were like, yeah, take your stuff back. That's a lot of money wasted. So if technology can help people try on their clothes and see how they fit and reduce any return rate, it will not only help people save money, but it also builds this long-term brand loyalty. She also tried to sell these VR headsets that you could just put them on and you could feel as if you were in the front row of her fashion shows. So creative. This is a fabulous brand to watch. Another company is Sephora that's really interesting. Now, the reason I want to point this out and bring it up is because what's very interesting about what Sephora has done is that they've tried to harness augmented reality by using technology that you already carry with you. Right? We all have our phones with us all the time. I think if we're ever more than 3 feet away from our phone, we get panic attacks. So you don't need to go and buy a specific VR, AR headset. This is just part of your phone. And it's really clever. So you put the camera on, it looks at your face, and then it just superimposes those eyelashes and different lipstick colors. It's brilliant. You can make yourself, if you're feeling very jet lag, as if I'm doing from rejet, like I'm really tired, I'm like, okay, let me make sure I look a bit nicer. I'll at least just look at myself in that. And in testing it out, I ended up buying 4 lipsticks. So obviously it's working quite well for them. Finally, just to point out another different trend that we're seeing recently is things like what Pinterest is doing. It's a great way to enhance the discoverability of your product. No longer do we rely on just the photos on your website. Yes, we may put up photos on Pinterest of our products, but what if we want to highlight different types of things? Say if I want to talk about pumpkin soup and I'm trying to get recipe ideas. But if I spot a really lovely kitchen towel, I'm like, oh, that would go so well in my kitchen. I don't have to try to be like, oh, I wonder where they got it from. I can use sort of specific image search that can pinpoint details within a certain image, and then can go and find me things that are quite similar. And I can showroom and showcase my products far more effectively as a brand. Another trend is that where this type of technology can be used is Google bought mood stocks. All I have to do is point at something and take a picture of something I see in a magazine or something that I see on the street. Say I like the shoes somebody's wearing next to me on the train, but I don't want to ask them. I can try to take a photo. Well, not very creepily, right? Be careful. And it will instantly tell me like, okay, these are the shoes. This is the brand. This is where you can buy it. This is how much it costs. So the whole world becomes your showroom. All these are really important to pay attention to, because if we think about it, we're not selling to millennials. The millennials, yes, they're the customers of today, but 5 years from now, or think another 10-year shift, we're going to Gen Z. My son's 10 and he falls snap in the middle of Gen Z. And if you think about it, these kids are growing up today by looking at images. It's a Snapchat world. They're so used to this. So they communicate with images. So the whole visual element is going to be hugely, hugely important. So what should you do? Try to think about what's a good strategy for your brand. How can you use images? Is it augmented reality? Is it just more detailed images? And then try to come up with a way to have better images on your site, really high quality ones, and follow all your best practices for those SEO best practices for images that we've talked about for more than 10 years now. Make sure you have a really good file name, your title tag, your captions, all of that. Follow it. Let's talk about the tangible, the things that we still use our thumbs to press buttons for. Let me ask you guys this. Do you think text messaging is smart? A lot of people say, no, text messaging, that's not a very smart thing. It's normal. It's on my phone. It's an SMS. But where it gets really smart is the number of people that actually use it. Just take a look at the active monthly users that are on these chat apps like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and WeChat. They have far more users than the social media apps like Instagram or Twitter. But what's really, really interesting to me is look at where they all started. These have started so recently and they're already so popular. These are like the babies of the technology age and they're already so powerful. So I'm really excited to see what they do when they grow up. And they are going to grow up quite quickly because just look at the user base. There's 2.5 billion people using these messaging apps now. Chances are your grandmother may not have a Facebook account, but she is definitely having an SMS or some kind of messaging app. We all use it. And what's more important is think about how quickly you respond to an SMS. If you get a text, you're probably going to check it within the first 5 minutes that you receive it, and you're more likely to respond as soon as possible, unless you want to ghost somebody, and that's a different story. But let's look at the usage rates. It's predicted to grow to 3.6 billion users next year. That's more than India and China put together. It's huge number of users. And we can already see that they're being used really well for e-commerce. WeChat's a really good example in China. Now, I know that the internet is slightly more restricted there. So a free chat service that lets you take different actions all the time works quite well. Some of the top uses of WeChat tends to be to access products and services. So I would argue that it's not just a chatting platform, it's an e-commerce platform that has chat capabilities. And we already see these kinds of chats being used in the West here as well. For example, going back to Sephora, they have a chat bot. So you can chat with a robot and you can take a little quiz that'll know you better and it will say that, hey, can I give you some makeup tips? Or do you want to check out product reviews? And you can just have this little on-demand chat message like, yeah, I want to get some tips for my face and I want to learn how to do contouring. And she'll go and send you these tips. Now, why is Sephora doing this? It's great customer relationship management, right? It's also a really good sales tool. If there's no human or time element that goes into sort of managing this on a day-to-day, we're just chatting with a robot. I could get all these tips. The tips will mention specific products. I would be convinced to buy these products probably. So really great in terms of lifetime value for the customers. And it's not just that. Bing, we see this as well. Yes, search is really important, but rather than looking for flights to New York just on your typical SERP, so your search box, you would go suddenly to the Skyscanner bot within Skype, and that still has the backend powered by the search, by Bing search. But now I can just engage with the chat and it's more conversational. It's helpful. So search is just going more and more outside of the search box, which is so interesting to see. It still powers everything. It's still the backbone of everything that we do. We're just engaging with search in more friendly, personalized ways. And to that, people have said that by 2020, customers will manage 85% of their relationship with the enterprise without interacting with a human. Now, at first, that stat was a little bit like crazy, like, no way, how can that be? But if we just take a look at these examples now, we're seeing that these bots are getting really smart. They have this capabilities now to understand emotion, to talk through natural language, to translate things live for you. They are better than a human. And these bots just sit there like a genie in the bottle. Every time you want them, you just rub your lamp, the genie comes out, helps you, and then it goes away. It doesn't bother you, it doesn't need anything else. It's just there ready to serve you when you need it. So that's a very good reason why I think we're going to start engaging with bots a lot more. So, what should you do? Try to think of adding in some type of more conversational and human engagement elements that can be taken over by the bots. Can you add more of these? If you have a live chat functionality, can you make it more detailed with smarter chatbots that are powered by AI? These chatbots are surprisingly very easy to build. If you went to something like Microsoft Bot Framework, for example, you could go in and just kick off setting up your own chatbot in a matter of minutes. And then, of course, you can start to get it to be more and more advanced. And that's when you want to think about it as how advanced do they need to be? If you're a bank ATM, then maybe your chatbot needs to be pretty functional. Doesn't need to have a huge personality. But if you want to be maybe a personal shopper, sort of what who's doing that? Watson is doing that with North Face, and it's so interesting. You want to try to have a bit more of a personality and banter back and forth, so people want to keep using you. Finally, we can't talk about the future without talking about voice and the audible, and when we actually have to talk to our devices. And yes, it's more than voice search, right? It's voice-based actions, it's voice-based reminders, or these different conversations that we have with our machines to help make our lives more productive and more effective and smooth. So let's see, when do we find that people tend to be using voice search? Is really when you're typing, when you can't type. So say you're driving, that's really a very high use. If you're looking for just a quick answer, you may be cooking something and you're like, hey, Dad, did I need 2 cups of sugar or was it 1.5? And you can just get a quick answer, or you're walking around, especially if you're local, and say, hey, what time does my bank close today? Those are good ones. If you're otherwise occupied, you might be second screening. We see this happen quite often with voice search. You tend to be second screening, doing something else. You may be watching a football match and you're like, oh, wait, did Arsenal win this match back 10 years ago or not? Who did that? And also another very important use is if you have scissors instead of fingers, then you don't have any choice but to use voice search. And I can't walk around anywhere without being hit on the head with some type of voice control device. My remote control at home has voice control. If you drive around in your car, I mean, I don't have a fancy BMW, unfortunately, but again, my car still has vocal. I can be like, hey, call this person. Or if you have drag and drive messaging, you can dictate your text messages if you're driving around. Or my favorite one, that is for, makes lazy people around the world rejoice, is your voice controlled hotel room. Aloft Hotels have partnered with Siri so that you can just stay in bed and be like, turn on the light, turn off the light, make the temperature warmer, go here, and see where should I go for breakfast. It's so fun. It makes us really easy and lazy, but it makes sense why we do this. It's not just because we're lazy. If we try to look at how many words per minute we can speak versus type, it's about 38 to 40 words typing. And in speaking, it's about 110 to 150 words per minute while speaking. If I'm yelling at my husband, it's 500 words per minute. But hey, that's neither here nor there. But this makes sense. Our world is becoming more and more controlled with voice. Every single thing, technology that we have, we can almost control it. We can say, hey, turn off the lights, hey, turn down the temperature, all of these things with voice. And that makes sense. We'll get used to it. And it'll almost reach the point where Comscore has predicted that by 2020, 50% of search will come from voice. And that doesn't mean that desktop is going to die or anything is going to die. It's just going to be more searches. So the volume of searches is going to go up to the point where half of all search is going to come from voice. And yes, a small part of our regular activities will get cannibalized by voice, but only because it's more efficient and it's easier and it makes more sense. And the one way that voice is quite helpful for us as advertisers is that we tend to use more intent words with voice search. And the type of question and natural language and the full sentence that we use will give us the intent much there. It's like, hey, which is the cheapest digital camera that is waterproof? Just in that one sentence, I know that people are looking not just for a regular camera, they're looking for one that's waterproof and they're also price sensitive. So I got these two additional cues. And in an interview that Eric Enger did with Gary Ilyesh from Google, Gary had mentioned that searches on mobile devices are 30 times more likely to take immediate action around them. And we've seen that with our queries too. For example, I looked at one of our top travel clients and I looked at their top 20 queries on desktop and tablets. And they tended to be just research based words like flights to hotels in blah, blah. Then I looked at people at the top 20 mobile queries for the same company. And they were very different. They were all people trying to look for things to do in the city they were in right now. So the best Italian restaurant for dinner, the best tour of the Duomo, anything like that that makes sense. It was around them and near. And voice is just going to play that up that as much because we tend to use voice on our mobile devices while we're on the go. So a good tip to think about is to see how and where you show up. Right? If I'm looking for the best Italian restaurants in Milan, Cortana is going to understand that Prerna is looking for Italian restaurants in Milan that have good reviews. So she's going to show me a list of restaurants. And what's interesting is that I may not want to click on any of these websites. So, like Rand Fishkin's been a big person to talk about this trend where people are going to the SERPs, but they don't click beyond the SERPs. I think we're going to continue to see that with these sort of local listings here. People just want to know the phone number, the address, where is it, and also the reviews. A good tip is to look at where that particular business is taking their reviews from. So Cortana in Europe is pulling from TripAdvisor, for example. In the US, if I'm looking for a US restaurant, she'll tend to pull from Yelp. So if I want to prioritize improving my reviews or doing any kind of reputation management, I would want to look at where the digital assistant is pulling them from. So that would make a good place for me to go and tailor that first. So if I had to think of a three-step checklist for you to look at with voice search or just to get your sort of toes wet, is analyze your search terms report or your search query report, either within Search Console or get from your PPC teams. Look at what people are using voice search for you now, if at all. Based on that information, based on the intent that you're really seeing, you want to try to see if you can revisit maybe some of your targeting strategy. Should I do more local? Should I do more more kind of citations? Should I do more kind of like videos to answer questions? And that's when you can get very creative about the creative. So you can look at the right ads if you're running PPC ads, the right landing page, just to help people get the action that they want as quickly as possible. So it's all these trends now are just a sign for what's to come. Like if you had to think about your cell phone 10 years ago, you still were happy with it, right? All it did was make calls, but you thought it was fantastic. And now we're at this point where we're we're at the stage where all our technology is like a cell phone that can only make calls. It's great, we love it, but it's going to become so much better. It's going to become so much stronger and can do a lot more for us. I want to show you one last video, and that will just show you a sign of things to come. Oh, yeah, how cool was that? Did you see how it tended to use all the different things we talked about? It used the visual search where she took a photo of something in a magazine. It used the chat bots where she talked to Cortana and Cortana talked to the bot of the store. And in less than 60 seconds, she saw something in a magazine and it was being shipped to her. And it was so easy. And it understood her. It made personalized recommendations. She landed in Vegas and said, hey, you might be wanting to do this instead. So it's so smart. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what these things are going to be able to do. And of course, the first reaction when I share this video to people sometimes is, oh my God, that's terrifying. And you know what? What's happening is that we just need to keep calm and realize that all the technology is taking baby steps. We can be so much in charge of what the future is going to be like. It's only going to be what we're willing to accept and what we're willing to engage with. So, and we're not even the target audience, which is interesting. It's more Gen Z. So like 5 or 10 years from now, they're the audience. So what are they willing to accept? And just to think about the small baby steps that are happening now that you may not even realize. If you have an iPhone, if you have the latest iOS 10 software, you can notice that you can tell Siri to go and engage with other apps for you. So you can say that, hey, send $100 to Alex for me for dinner yesterday using Venmo. So Siri will talk to Venmo and send the money. Of course, you still have to put in your password and authorize, but she has the power to already start talking to these other apps. So it's little baby steps that are happening already now. So that's why I want to say your future, the future is right now. If you have any questions, I love chatting about this all the time. Use your voice. Let's chat at Twitter or add me on LinkedIn at any time. Just add Purna Virji on Twitter. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for your time. I'll come back to you guys for Q&A later.
Thank you very much for your great presentation. It was really a pleasure. And now we are turning to the next speaker, and we are happy to have AG among our speakers today. And let's see the research which he has conducted, and that should be, I'm sure, very, very interesting. So AJ, please start your flow.
All right, cool. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's get this all set up. Okay, excellent. So like I said, I'm AJ Gergich. I'm the founder and CEO of Gergich & Company. And today I'm excited to share some research with you on featured snippets. So we're actually in the process of completing a big study with SEMrush. If you're not familiar with SEMrush, they are a fantastic keyword research tool. And what's interesting about this study that we did, where you see a lot of keyword research studies, it'll be say, okay, it's 1 million keywords, but the keywords are kind of random. And so what we did here was we actually looked at around 80 million keywords. And then from that, we took a subset of 1.4 million that had featured snippets. So it was a pretty in-depth study. And I want to share with you guys, what we found. And I think it'll be very actionable. So briefly about our company and why I'm actually even focusing on featured snippets is, Gergich & Company is brought in to do high-end content. We do very visual work, infographics, in-depth articles with charts and graphs and all those types of things. The main KPIs that we're focusing on are earning links, social, and traffic. But what's happening is, whether it's an enterprise client or a small business client that we're working with, across the board, I'm everyone going, hey, what are featured snippets? How do I get those, right? And so the conversation isn't pushing them to say, hey, you need them. Everybody thinks that they need featured snippets, but there's a lot of confusion out there on how to optimize for them, how to earn them. And so today, hopefully, we can shed some light on that for you guys and give you some good info. So I'm not going to go over, I'm assuming this is a more advanced audience, so I'm not going to go over featured snippets specifically. I do, on the next slide, there is a link to a course presentation I did this year that is a better on featured snippets. But briefly, show up in an organic search, and they show up as table listings, paragraphs, or list. And so you can earn these And just like you're earning a top position, position 1, 2, or 3, it's all organic, and they show up just in different formats. Like I said, at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a link to a presentation. If you want a better primer on them, go check that out, and it'll definitely point you in the right direction. So why should we focus on featured snippets, right? So what's the point of it all? The biggest point I would say is that you can leapfrog your competition to position 0. That's a term that Dr. Pete from Moz coined. And it's position 0 because as SEOs, we've always been focused on, how many keywords can I get in the top 5? How many keywords can I get in the top 3? And so on and so forth, right? All organic. Well, the cool thing about featured snippets is they jump the top position into position 0. So you're ahead of everyone, literally. And the cool thing is you don't have to pay for it. Normally, to get ahead of everybody, right, you would have to buy a PPC. You would have to buy AdWords. In this case, it's all free organic traffic. So the other thing that you need to look at is that you are able to answer your customers' actual questions. And that's a really good benefit I think featured snippets kind of forces you to do. In your content strategy, you should be doing this, of course. You should look at all the questions that your customers are asking throughout the buying cycle. But this makes sure, if you're going to optimize for featured snippets, you have to ensure that your content is actually optimized to answer these questions, or you're not going to. And so it's a dual benefit there. The other thing is that you can get featured snippets throughout, the purchasing cycle. So you can earn them all the way from, awareness all the way through the decision phase, where awareness might be somebody searching for, what the heck is this? And then the decision phase is, hey, can I compare the price of XYZ to another company? So all of those tend to have featured snippets, and they're all sitting there waiting for you to earn them. And so you can do that in pretty much any niche. I've never seen a niche so far that didn't have some featured snippets, because people always have questions, and that's what featured snippets are really aimed at doing, answering those questions and pointing the customer right to the best answers for those questions. So again, like I said, we worked with SEMrush, 1.4 million featured snippets analyzed, and let's go ahead and dive in. So briefly on this, the goal is a little bit different. My team had seen a lot of questions, prepositions, and comparison search phrases produce featured snippets, but we didn't have the data to back it up. It's just what we were seeing on the ground. And so what we wanted to do with SEMrush is look at 29 specific search phrases, but they were all questions, prepositions, and comparisons. And we wanted to see if the data backed up what we were kind of seeing out there with earning these for clients. And so I'm going to walk you through this broken down section by section, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. So first off, we'll look at questions, and these are the questions that we analyzed. The basics, who, what, when, where, how, all that kind of stuff. But you can see we have a few more than maybe you see in some of the other studies, like do and is, can, which, those kind of things. And what you would want to do with a list like this is you could take these type of, here's the questions that we see producing featured snippets, right? Take this and just apply it to your niche. So right now I have it looking at cloud storage, why is cloud storage a good idea, right? That is an awareness phase search. And so, you can go all the way through to decision. So it can fit any niche, because these are questions that would fit for pretty much anything. So use this list with your niche keywords, and you'll start to find tons of featured snippets. I'm going to break down here in a second, a really good view of this, but I'll give you some of the key findings right away. Questions specifically were fantastic at earning featured paragraph snippets. So if you're looking at a keyword and it's a question, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a paragraph snippet that you're trying to optimize for. Now, in each of these, you will see some kind of rule breakers, like how and have are questions, but we found that they earned list at a high rate, and which was pretty good at earning table. So you can't say it's every question paragraph, right? It's not that neat and tidy. It'll be more clear when I show you this slide of the breakdown. So you can see we have all the questions listed in red, okay? And then we have the table, the list, and the paragraph, the 3 forms of snippets that you can earn, and the percentage that each question earned for that. You'll notice I will say what is missing down at the bottom because we're still processing that data. So we just literally just got this. So let's take a look at this. If you look, we've highlighted paragraph in red at the top. And you can see just huge numbers like who, 95%, why, 99.9%, basically 100% of the time, why will produce a paragraph snippet. But it is interesting to see how and have and which react a little bit differently. And they're more optimized for list. One caveat I'll tell you, you might look at this and say, well, you know, how is actually better for paragraph because it's 51%. But you got to think about it this way. Paragraphs are all over the place. That's the main thing you're going to run into. Lists are, you know, less pronounced, but tables are even rarer. So as you go down, when you see something like 50% on something like a list or a table, it's actually a huge percentage. And in the case of it usually is that there's just not enough optimized content. Google would like to show more lists, but maybe they don't have enough lists to show. So when you're looking at this, sure, look at the, you know, what's getting the top percentages, but also be mindful that, you know, even though which down there is showing 16% for a table, that's actually a really good score for tables. And so that, if I were optimizing keyword, I would definitely consider looking at which search phrases as a table, which makes sense. It's almost like a comparison chart. So the next thing we looked at was prepositions. So, you know, like cost for cloud storage. And again, same thing. You can apply this to any niche. Just insert your keywords. You'll find tons of featured snippets. And so we ran these are the ones that we were using, that we were, you know, finding featured snippets on. And so we wanted to see if the data backed that up. So the key findings here is that, interesting, the prepositions were really good at earning lists. So questions were really great at earning paragraphs. Prepositions are really great at earning lists. There are a few little rule breakers, like for, excuse me, was really good at earning tables, and like was horrendous at earning list. It basically was really good at earning paragraphs. So you can't just go in, like I said, blindly and say, okay, you know, it's only going to earn list. So if you look at the breakdown again, the questions and prepositions here are in red, and then we've highlighted list. And you'll see like 2, you know, 51%. And that piggybacks off of how in the questions, which also had a high list finding. So when you're looking at this, again, if you break down, you do all your keyword research and you break down all the questions that you're going to get, and then you find all the ones that, you know, you're a target for featured snippets, you've got to put it in the right format. So with preposition, if you're doing a keyword with like in it, you're going to format it for a paragraph. And I'm going to show you how to format that here in a second. But I just want to drive that home, is use this chart to tell you the format Google wants that content in. So lastly, we were looking at comparison searches, and I love comparison searches because they're end of buying cycle, decision phase, you know, cloud storage price. That's someone who's looking to purchase, right? They're way down the line versus someone saying, you know, what is cloud storage, right? Or when you're doing, you know, cloud storage comparison type search, that is phenomenal to be able to take that for your brand, control that, and paint yourself in a hopefully good light, and get free traffic there that can convert. So the key findings here was that comparisons were great at earning tables. And as I mentioned, price, I mean, that's ROI right there, just sitting on the table for you. Where I actually made a mistake with our team is we assumed, because we didn't have the data yet, that versus would do phenomenal at earning tables. We already saw that the comparisons were earning tables at a higher rate than other things. But again, we wanted to, let's look at the data and back it up, right? So we had also just lumped versus in there too, because it makes sense. Like you're literally comparing, you know, this computer, you know, laptop, Mac versus PC, or whatever you're comparing, right? So we were dead wrong on that when you looked at the data. So if you look here at versus, it is horrendous at earning tables, 0.82%. So it's 99% of the time when they have a versus keyword phrase, it's best to format that as a paragraph. And so that was something where the data told us opposite of what I was thinking. But overall, what we were seeing on the ground actually held true. So if you see, we've highlighted table in red, you can see that comparison compared, there's 16s, 13s, price 38%. And again, remember, you're saying, okay, well, wait a minute, it's 83% paragraph. Well, there's not a lot of tables out there that are formatted, optimized. There's a lot more just content that they can snippet into a paragraph. So when you see a higher number than normal for tables, jump on that, format some of your content in tables, and you'll be rewarded for that. So here's the overall breakdown. You can kind of see the tic-tac-toe pattern happening here, right? So overall questions had a 92%. For paragraphs, and prepositions had 29% for list, and then you can see again comparisons for tables. And so when you're breaking down your keywords, when you look at all the questions that are being asked and start putting your content towards it, remember the format. So you don't just create some content, think about the format, because if you bucket these out and you make it in the right format, you're going to get a much better return on that content investment. So then the question becomes, okay, got it. I want it. Position 0, free traffic. Thanks. I'm going to optimize this in the proper format. What now? So we took this a little bit further. So we actually downloaded all the feature snippets and then analyzed them. And so it's kind of interesting information. So the paragraph snippets ended up coming out with an average of 45 words, which I'll show you in a second is spot on with what we've seen in some other studies. We also broke that down into characters as well, so you can kind of see where those are at. And then the list, how many items and words were in them, and how the maximum that shows for a list. There are some things though that I don't want you to do with this data. So I don't want you to look at list and say, okay, well, if I'm making a list, the average item is 4, so I'll just make a list with 4 or 5. Longer lists are better, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can definitely use this information. What you're more concerned with list is the maximum that they show than the average. Although with paragraph, you're definitely going to key in on the average. Same thing with table. You're looking at the amount of columns and rows. Again, I'm more interested there with the maximum number of rows. There are almost always going to be 3 columns, but the row maximum is what varies greatly there. So SEMrush did a study earlier in the year, and they found that 40 to 50 words were the sweet spot for paragraphs featured snippets. So our study comes in, bam, 45. So we now have 2 studies backing this up. So what do you do with that? So a lot of people, they think like, okay, well, I have to make featured snippet content. I'm going to write an article like that. I look at it a different way. You're already making content. Just have sections of your content optimized for featured snippets. So I'll give you, for instance, let's say, you had a section of your content on cloud storage that was, what is cloud storage? So you might have a header, like an H1 tag or an H2 tag, say, what is cloud storage? And then underneath that, you answer it. And if you start to look at your content under this lens of the 45 words that come right after the question, are they the best answer? Did I go off on a snarky tangent for a second and then answer the question? So you need to optimize your content in those 45, 50, 60 words, right in that range, to nail that answer. And the cool thing is if you do it and you hit publish and a week later you don't have the snippet, change it, edit it, hit save, and rinse and repeat until you steal that snippet from someone else. So you want to think about your content creation and working featured snippets, earning them into what you're already doing. You're not just going to go out and make like a 45-word, piece of content just for this featured snippet, and that's it. So remember when I said on the list that longer lists are better. You can see I was doing a little research here on getting ready for this presentation. The reason why is, do you see where it cut off at 8? And that's where it's saying is like, these are the longer list. If you look at the more items right there, it's telling the user, look, there's more, right? So this is 15 ways, and they can see that in the title, but it's also telling them right there. The other way is if you have to have a shorter list. Let's say you don't just put fluff in there, like that would lead to bad content, right? But let's say your list, for some reason, has to be 4, right? And so you're not going to get that more items. What you can do, though, is just make sure, I wouldn't have every single thing like it. Look at number 4, arrive early. But what if that was all it was? So you had 1, 2, 3, 4, and it was like boom, 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 boom. What would happen then is Google would just show the answer with no real incentive to click through. And so by truncating on the end, by using more words, it leads the user to want to engage more and click through. So when you're making a list, make them longer if at all possible. And if you can't do that, at least use 5, 10 words out to the side so you get the truncation and the incentive to click through. So when you're doing an optimized list, now this is just a straight up, bullet point or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you want to do, you can see here I have, things never to do, pull on Superman's cape or spit into the wind, right? So what you're looking at on the right is just some basic HTML. If you don't do HTML, don't worry about it. Look at what I have in red. All I'm doing is saying, hey, we use roles to mark up our HTML so that we can tell Google what's going on. So when you see here, H1 role, hey, this is a heading. UL role, this is a list. This is a list item. And doing this, I want to be clear, doing this is not going to earn you the featured snippet. Doing this is just ensuring that you have really clean code, that you don't have funkiness going on that makes it hard for search engines to process your data. The other thing I'll say about optimized list is you don't have to do them. I think the misconception is that you have to do them almost how I have it here, right? Like, pull on Superman's cape, spin into the wind, number 3, number 4, number 5. What you can actually do is you could have number 1 and then 300 words of content, 2, 3 paragraphs. And then you have number 2, and then you have number 3, and you could have a 1,500 word article that was, a 6-thing list, and that's totally fine as long as it's clean and Google can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then as long as the beginning of those paragraphs is something that they can pull. You can earn the feature snippet, and you'll see those all the time now when you look around. So it's not just a straight list. It can be an article with sections, and Google's perfectly adept at snagging those and truncating them down. So same thing here with your tables. I have example I used at Dreamforce with Rock versus Samsung Galaxy. They both fit in your pocket, but only one randomly explodes. And you can see here again, if your eyes are crossing over, it's just simple HTML. And we're using roles again to tell Google what we're doing. Hey, this is a heading. This is a grid. This is a row header. This is a specific row. And it's just clean code. And so when you are talking with your programming team, just tell them I want clean, old school tables, nothing crazy, funky that Google is having a hard time reading, that has to have all kinds of things enabled to read it. Just clean, simple tables that we've had forever work fantastic at earning the snippets. So this one here, I don't have the research yet. So this is just anecdotal, what I'm seeing out there. We're going to do another study and try to look at images. But here's what I see. 9 times out of 10, Google changes the image to around 285 by 160. So when you see a featured snippet and it has an image next to it, I mean, you totally want that. That's going to make it more attractive, more visual, right? It's usually 285 by 160, which is quite small. And if you'll notice, a lot of them, especially on like Retina, it's just pixelated and looks like crap. And that's because, it wasn't formatted to be that small. So if you're going to go into earning featured snippets and you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to segment my content, I'll do all this stuff, don't forget about images. And the basic rule of thumb is landscape, horizontal rectangles. If you just do that, you'll be fine. I've given you some sizes here, like 600 by 337. that perfectly downsamples to 285 by 160. So you'd be fine with that. But again, this isn't gospel. You'll see random sizes. You'll see, I've seen huge ones show up. I'm just showing you what I see the most. I mostly see 285 by 160-ish. And so if you just kind of follow those general formats for your images, they'll come out much better and they'll look a lot crisper and less pixelated when you do earn the featured snippet. Briefly, I'm going to talk just about 2 tools. In my other presentation, I'll talk about some more tools. So if you're out there going, okay, that's great, how do I find all these questions? There's a ton of tools out there. So Answer the Public, it's a free tool. And you can see all I did was enter in cloud storage, right? So I entered in cloud storage and I have 131 questions that come back. You can see, which cloud storage, and then they just start listing the questions. Which cloud storage has the best security? So this is a great place to start. So look at those buckets that I gave you with all the keywords, questions, prepositions, comparisons, and then put in your keywords. And you can quickly build up quite the list, thousands of questions for just about any niche. And like I said, it's a free tool. You can download them all and then segment them and start to look at where you're going to try to earn the feature snippet, how you're going to format the content, how you're going to optimize it, and you should be able to use this study to do all that. So check out Answer the Public. You're gonna really like it if you haven't used it before. The other one that I'm really pumped about right now is SEMrush's Keyword Magic tool. It's in beta. I've been beta testing it. And you can see here what I've done is I said cloud storage is the keyword that I want to analyze. But then you get a lot of features to break it down. So I said cloud storage, but only include keywords with how. And then you can't see it on the far right, but it says SERP features, one selected, and what I selected was featured snippets. So now the beauty is, and I also said that the cost per click had to be $1, right? So these are commercial keywords that are about cloud storage, that use the word how, that have featured snippets showing for them. And that should, at this point, like pop a light bulb over your head and go, okay. So you can take tools like this. Now I know like Ahrefs and Moz are working on these. I've talked to Ahrefs about this. They're coming out with some cool stuff. So a lot of these providers are all over this as well. I'm just showing you a couple tools because of time. But yeah, go check these out. Grab all the snippets before your competition does, and if they have them, steal them from them. You can frankly you can do that. And we'll talk more about it in the Q&A section as well. But the presentation is pinned at my Twitter. I'm at SEO. Please sling me a retweet. Again, special shout out to SEMrush for being cool to provide the industry with all that 80 million keyword research. That was really cool of them. And if you have questions later too, hit me up on Twitter. I'm happy to answer them. And I'd love to hear if you earned some featured snippets. I got, from my last presentation, a lot of emails back from people and tweets back from people saying, hey, I did it and it worked and I earned featured snippets. And, it's just cool to hear. So hit me up on Twitter and I'd be happy to chat and connect.
AJ, thank you very much for your very insightful presentation. And now we are ready to move to our next speaker. And we are happy to introduce you Nadia from Wingate. And she's going to speak about visual content since she and her company are dealing with infographics and various visual materials. So she's going to explain you how to boost your results with visuals. So Nadia, are you ready to join us?
Hey, yes, I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
We actually don't see your presentation or yourself.
There we go. How about now?
Yes, now we can see. Great.
Okay, great. So I'll get started then.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for taking the time out of your busy days to join me for this session. I'm really excited to talk about using visual content for getting higher rankings and better relationships. And like what it was mentioned, if you have any questions at the end, happy to answer them. And if you have any feedback, please share that with me as well so I can make sure that I'm constantly improving these sessions and that you guys gain some really useful and actionable tips. Just give me 1 second.
Nadia, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but can you maybe make your screen a bit bigger since it's quite small now?
the screen bigger? Sure.
Full screen, попроси.
Is that any better?
Let me check. Maybe a little bit more if it's possible. No?
Right now I have it at full size.
Full size. Okay, then let's move with this one. It's already much better than it was. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry about that.
No, don't worry. Everything is seen now. Thank you.
All right. Anyway, before I start talking at you guys for the next 25 minutes, I want to make sure the session's right for you. So you guys should be here if you have recently reached a standstill with your rankings on Google and are really at a loss of what to do next. You should also be here if you find yourself getting rejected by the influencers that you reach out to with little or no change. And you should be here if you've heard about the benefits of using visual content in your marketing and you want to just learn how to integrate that content into your own strategy. And lastly, you should be here if you want to successfully accomplish the above without breaking the bank. So I just want to take a quick poll. Who here currently uses visual content as part of their content strategy, and what kind of images do you use? So do you use stock photos, use infographics, do you use both, do you use none? If you guys want to just type it into the side there. All right, so typically the responses that I get from this are most people use a lot of stock photos or they use a little bit of both. So that's a good start. But the question is like, why should you use visual content? And I get it. What's the big deal? It's really time consuming to create really good content. And how can you really guarantee that that visual content is going to be seen? And how can you guarantee that it's going to be valuable and worth your time? So there are a lot of questions. And the fact is that nearly 75% of marketers surveyed in 2015 have said that visual content actually performed 2 to 5 times better than text-based content. And this is according to a survey that Sproutworth did last year. So why is this the case? Because visual content is about 60,000 times easier for your brain to interpret than text-based content. And on top of that, marketers believe that original graphics and illustrations, which include infographics, are actually 20% more effective than stock images. So that's a pretty substantial percentage. So why am I telling you all of this? Why is it necessary, and what does it mean for you? Well, if original graphics or infographics are more than 20% more effective than stock images, does that not create a greater need for original graphics? And this need for original visual content is the perfect opportunity for you to build relationships with influencers and as a result, boost backlinks, which will in turn drive up your SEO rankings and eventually lead to an increase in organic traffic. And for that, for you, that means an increase in revenue as well if you can convert that traffic. So the way you can build those connections and backlinks, as I mentioned, are with infographics. And by creating original infographics for influencers specifically, there's a massive potential for higher rankings and these better relationships. So the way you can do this, I'm actually going to break down the process that myself and the team at Vengage used for boosting our own rankings, traffic, and revenue by over 400%. And we did this in just less than a year. So I'm going to break it down in 4 really easy steps. Before I move on, I do want to be completely transparent that anyone who's participating in this session should know what I'm going to be sharing with you is not a quick fix solution. So I'm not going to give you a magic formula or a silver bullet that will suddenly change your life. But what I will do is share my exact process with you. And if you follow these steps closely and practice this method consistently over time, you should see really valuable results. But it will not happen overnight. So for us, it took, like I said, just under a year. It might take just as long for you, might take a bit less time, but it really comes down to how much work you're really willing to put into it. And that being said, this process works. So Vengage managed to triple its revenue, boost signups and traffic by 400% by following these 4 steps. And I want to make sure each one of you actually can achieve that same thing. So we're going to move on to the first step. And this is researching influencers and top content. So before you even start creating any infographics, you need to make sure that you find relevant influencers in your niche, and you can make those infographics for those influencers. So you also need to research content by those influencers that you can reference during your pitch. So how do you find these appropriate influencers? I'm going to highlight two main tools that I use for influencer and content outreach. So the tools I use, as you all know, are probably Moz's Fresh Web Explorer and BuzzSumo's most shared content tool. So they're both great in their own way. You don't need both of them. One is usually enough, but I'll go through each one so you can decide which one suits your preferences. When it comes to search engine optimization, Moz is definitely a recommended tool. What I want to focus on today, however, is one specific aspect of Moz that will help you research fresh content that is relevant to your business. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already used this. The first thing you need to know about building up a good contact list is how to use a Fresh Web Explorer, and this can be found when you sign into Moz Pro. And what this tool does is it scours the web for the latest content pertaining to a certain keyword. We were trying to rank on a number of different keywords, including terms like infographic, infographic maker, infographic template, and a handful of other relevant terms. We tried searching for those keywords using the Fresh Web Explorer, but we quickly realized that in this list of results, we kept seeing competitor mentions. So the last thing we wanted to do was reach out to our own competitors, asking them for a favor. So we changed our direction up a bit, and we asked ourselves three important questions. And those three questions were, what kind of people blog a lot, which sites have high domain authorities, and which of those people and sites would want to publish an infographic? So the answers we came up with were content marketers, lifestyle bloggers, education bloggers, and people in PR. So these are the people who are most likely to give you a backlink when asked. Why? Because as marketers, you probably understand the need for links. Lifestyle and education bloggers are typically freelance writers as well, at least the ones that I've come in contact with, and many of whom have no issue giving you a link in exchange for a service or for something that's beneficial to them. And most marketers and PR individuals also have access to sites with relatively high domain authorities because a lot of them guest blog at major publications as well. And then education sites or universities in particular have some high domain authorities, not only because teachers and educators are constantly referencing them, but because there's just a lot of content constantly being published and a lot of students coming in as visitors. And of course, freelance writers contribute to a variety of different sites, some of which include publications like Huffington Post, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Mashable, and the list goes on and on. So we searched for content that fell into those categories. And some of the keywords we plugged into Moz were pretty generic phrases like social media marketing tips, content marketing blog, how to rank on SEO, tools for educators, blogging tips, basically terms that fit into all of those different categories. So anything we thought people in the previously mentioned groups would write about. And as you can see in this image, we entered a term and chose the time bracket we wanted to see results for. So since Moz looks at the entire web, we only looked at results from the past week and we exported that list. Then we went on to BuzzSumo, and unlike Moz, BuzzSumo does not have as far of search reach, so you can usually get more refined results, and we use the content research tool. So we typed in similar search terms, exported that list as well, and the content research tool shows you results based on social interactions. The articles with the most social interactions appear in that order, so you can actually choose to look at content from the past, or you can choose to look at content from the past year. Again, you don't get as many results as Moz, but you do get a quality list of articles that did well on social media. Okay, so now we move on to the fun part, and this is organizing your list. So once you've exported your list, whether it's from Moz or BuzzSumo or both, you need to organize that list and filter out all the junk, I guess. And that means anything with a low domain authority, any site that only has no follow links. And these are sites like forums, Reddit, Pinterest, etc. So you want to import your list into a Google spreadsheet or into an Excel document, and then delete all of the columns except for the one that says blog title and URL. And if there isn't already a column, add one for the first name, last name, and email address of that contact. So this is the tricky part, and for most of you that do outreach, you know that it requires a lot of work, and a lot of you are probably going to roll your eyes at me, but that's okay because I can't see you anyway. So what you can do now is go through each URL and find out who the author of that article was and what their email is. So this is why you really want to filter out the junk beforehand so you don't waste your time finding information for sites that might be useless to you. And that way you can populate your list with the relevant contact information. So if your list is under 100 people, then manually populating your list is definitely doable, but anything more than that is going to be very time consuming for you. So simple data entry work like this is something you can hire a virtual assistant for. I recommend using Upwork to find someone remote. And if you decide to do the work manually, Reportive, as many of you probably know, is a Chrome extension that syncs with your Gmail account, and you can validate whether an email you enter is correct, since it pulls up the individual's LinkedIn profile for reference. So when you get the right email, it kind of looks like this. And there's actually another tool I haven't included in here, but hunter.io is one that's really good. There's a major limit on the freemium version of the tool, and it restricts you to only 150 requests a day, which is actually quite a few for a freemium version. But you need to upgrade to a paid plan to get access to more emails. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate. So hunter.io, I would recommend checking that tool out. And if you don't already have enough work set up for you, one thing you can do as an extra step is to find the person's top performing content on their blog. So BuzzSumo lets you do this by searching a domain and listing the content based on the number of shares. So by tracking the influencer's best content, you can, one, further reinforce the benefits of adding an infographic to that article and giving it another round of promotion. And two, the benefit you gain is exposure on an article that is already performing really well, and that extra SEO juice. So if that article already ranks on the first page of Google for a certain keyword, a link to your site in that same article with visual content can be extremely beneficial. So once you have your list ready, you can start preparing for your pitch. Now, your pitch is what will determine whether or not an influencer decides to work with you. So you need to make sure it's a great pitch. Your pitch should be made up of 5 components: the subject, the opener, the presentation, the ask, and the sign-off, and each component is important to include. And if you're thinking that why do you need so much presentation or so much preparation for your email that you send out, it's super crucial. I know this because I send so many emails all the time. I'm really used to facing rejection. And these are just the tactics that I've noticed work best. So your subject line is what we're going to start with, and this is how someone decides whether or not to open your email. So if you have a shitty subject line, no one's going to open your email and no one's going to reply to your email. So MailChimp actually did a study that looked at different subject lines in an email and analyzed how certain phrases performed better than others. And what they learned was that the subject lines, which were direct to the point, not too salesy, those are the ones that perform best. So in other words, try to refrain from cheesy subject lines. Well, like I think I got this one last week was, this will be the best email you read all day. Because what if it isn't the best email they read all day? Then you'll be a liar and people will ignore any other emails that come from you. So the next part is the opener, and the opener is the introduction line of your email. So if the subject line is your Tinder profile, think of the opener as a first date. I don't know how many of you guys are on Tinder, but the subject line or your opener is really important. So just like a first date, you want to appear genuine. You want to start with a friendly greeting. Don't be afraid to show some of your personality in this first sentence. And then the next part is the presentation. As you may have guessed, the presentation is the meat of your pitch. So this is a part where you really present the reason for emailing a person. So whether you want them to share an article for you or give you a link, you need to present it in a way that's appealing to them. And this is why it's important to offer the influencer something. In our case, we offered to make them an infographic, which was a proposal that was very difficult for many people to refuse. Like, who doesn't want a free infographic? Most agencies will charge anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 for one infographic. So a free one is a pretty obvious steal. And a lot of the influencers we reached out to really saw this. So find a way to offer this person something irresistible, but don't ask them for anything in return just yet. First, reel them in, make sure they're hanging on to your every word. And then the next part is the ask. And now that you've offered them something, you can ask the influencer for a favor once they've taken you up on your initial offer. And you can choose to send the ask in a follow-up email after you're sure that they want your infographic, but that's not entirely necessary. You can keep it within the same email. But the point is to just keep it simple and once again, make it seem like your request is tiny compared to what you're giving them in exchange. So we asked them if they would be willing to include the infographic we made for them in the original blog post with a simple attribution link back to us. And finally, the sign off is how you end your email. So with this, try not to be overly pushy. Don't use words like "I expect to hear back from you," which happens more frequently than you might think. Instead, express to the influencer your excitement to collaborate with them. Not only is it not pushy, but it can act as a subtle ego boost to the person who you're reaching out to. And then after you've emailed everyone on your list, you can make an infographic. So there are actually 2 steps to this process. The first is requesting an outline, and the second part is actually designing the infographic. So if you're freaking out and worried that you have no design skills, don't worry, we're going to address that issue. I actually had no design skills when I first started this process. I'm not going to say I'm a master designer right now, but I definitely improved a lot, and the infographics actually get published. So we'll get to that in a bit. Now, like I said, the first step is to ask the influencer to send you an outline of the exact content that you want to see in the infographic. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first, they already know that the content in the blog post very well because they wrote it, so it will take far less time for them to just send you a quick outline of the article. And they will also know better what material the infographic can do without and what information is crucial to keep in. So second, it saves you time. And in the past, I've noticed that even though the influencer asks me to prepare the outline for them, they always have plenty of last-minute suggestions and changes they want to make. And there's a lot of emailing back and forth, and it's a serious waste of time. And getting them to prepare the outline actually ensures that they're happy with the content being included. So the question that is probably on your mind right now is how to even begin to create this infographic. So assuming you're not an expert designer yourself who's highly skilled in the art of Photoshop or Illustrator, you might need to seek out other alternatives. And in this case, you can choose to use an online tool or contract a designer. Now, if you use a tool, you can look to spend anywhere between $15 to $50 a month, and it would take you about 2 to 5 hours probably to create a relatively good infographic. Naturally, I recommend Venngage, but I am biased. But you can also choose to hire a designer. So if you hire an in-house designer, an entry-level designer will usually cost you between $30,000 to $40,000 US a year, and that number will just keep going up the more experience they have. Now, typically designers take at least a full day to get back to you, and some will take up to a week to get something done, others will take longer. But a designer also gives you one more person to communicate back and forth with. So if you're looking for some cheaper alternatives, you can check Upwork, or you can also find someone that you can contract who fits your budget. And you can search for somebody who uses an infographic tool. So for instance, on Upwork, if you search Venngage within the freelance section, you might find somebody that already knows how to use that tool. So in less than a year, like I said, we went from not even ranking on the first page of Google to ranking in the first place for our top 5 converting keywords. And currently, I think we rank for over 200 different high volume words, as well as a bunch of long tail keywords. Luckily for you, we recently launched a business plan. And this is the Venngage for Business Plan. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just going to quickly run through some features of the plan. It lets you add people to your marketing team, so that will make it easier to collaborate on infographics if you guys have a big SEO or a big link building team. You can also create custom brand colors, logos, fonts, and manage and share your team templates. So there's also a folders portion that lets you organize everything you do as well. And it allows you to share these infographics privately between influencers or just between your teammates. You can also choose from hundreds of already created templates, so you don't actually have to go out of your way to create something from scratch every time. That can make your life a lot easier. Like I said, I made an infographic in maybe like 20, 30 minutes in the past. If you are interested in learning more about some more advanced aspects of infographic design and just how to visualize data in a compelling way that increases your conversions, the CEO of Venngage, he actually offers this free infographic masterclass. So you guys can actually get hands-on advice on how to create these visuals better, whereas I'm just mostly touching on link building strategies. But naturally, mastering the art of infographics doesn't happen overnight. This masterclass does make it a lot easier to fully grasp the basics so that you can just get better at making lots of great infographics in much less time. And like I said, it's completely free because I understand time and money is very valuable and you do want to make the most of it. And of course, the more influencers you reach out to and create infographics for, the more backlinks you get. And with more backlinks to a specific term, you all know the higher you'll rank on SEO for that term. Of course, there are other elements that that have a say on how you rank on SEO, but backlinks are always great. So when you rank higher in Google, you all know you'll drive more organic traffic back to your site, specifically people who are searching for that term. And more traffic typically means more signups, more upgrades, and in the end, more money in your pocket. And I want to make sure that at the end of the day, you're getting more money in your pocket, and that's it. So the last step is the promotion step. And just because you've created an infographic for one specific influencer doesn't mean that you can promote it to other influencers. Like I said, you put your time into creating that infographic, so you might as well make the most of it, right? It will take you tons of time if you're just creating one infographic for each influencer. So your goal should be to create specific infographics for different influencers and then try to find many more influencers to pitch those existing infographics to. So what can you do? Like I said, you can repurpose that infographic and pitch it. This includes guest blogging. So you can republish one infographic 100 times as long as the copyright is a little bit different. A lot of sites require you to just write about 400 to 800 original words if you want to post something. You can also ask other influencers or bloggers who write about similar subjects to include the infographic in their posts. If you use Ahrefs, that's a really good tool for finding people who've linked back to specific content already. So find people that have maybe linked or included an infographic in previous posts, and then just include that as well. Just give me 1 second. So let's say, hypothetically, you create an infographic about the 10 do's and don'ts of SEO, right? You can search for that title on Google as well, and find someone who's written something along the same lines. Follow the initial list building process that I mentioned before and reach out to them and ask them if they'd be interested in posting your infographic. Chances are they're going to say yes because it's an infographic that's already relevant to them. So instead of sending them the image attachment, this is an added tip, is send them the embed code. Not only does it speed up the process for them when they want to publish the infographic, but it actually lets you include your link back to your site as the creator of the infographic underneath that post. So that's 2 birds, 1 stone. And if after all this, you're still skeptical about using infographics, don't worry. They aren't the only tools that lead to higher rankings and better relationships. You might be great at making videos. I've seen plenty of people that have created videos for influencers and gotten either used it as an affiliate program or for SEO purposes. You can also create slide shares, ebooks, charts. We have a free tool called Beam, and it just lets you quickly plug in some data and print out a chart. So that's also really useful. But the point is, you want to figure out where your talent lies and what skills or services you can offer to someone else. So if you do decide to take to give infographics a shot, I created a little quick 30% off coupon for anyone who's listening. So that will just bring the regular price from $49 a month for our business plan down to $35 a month. So you guys are totally welcome to use this. I think the coupon is valid until this weekend. So ask around your friends or ask your boss if it's worth it and go for it. Like I said, less than a year, we tripled our revenue. And like, if you're making $500,000 right now, next year you could be making 1.5 million. So it seems like a worthwhile investment when you look at it in the long run. So code's only valid for the business plan. If you just go to Vengage, this is what you'll see. You can actually get up to 50% off with that. So the code is actually going to take you down to $27 a month if you go with the annual plan. And it's DIGOLY 30. So just take a screenshot of that, or you can email me and I can send it to you later. But yeah, that's just if you want to take it to the next level and actually you do plan on using infographics. So to end off, I just want to finish by saying that it might seem a bit cheesy, but I really believe it. Don't put in half the work unless you're okay with half the results. And if you really want to achieve the best results, you can't only do some of the work. You'll need to invest the time, the effort. You want to create a dent in your rankings. And if you want to connect with more influencers that will help you make the right dents, you really need to just put in more of that effort in. Like I said, this process has worked in the past, continues to work for us. And on that note, I guess we'll pass it back over to you, Kate.
Okay, Nadia, thank you very much for your lesson presentation. And now it's time for us to have a little bit of questions and answers. So guys, maybe you have some questions to each other.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I was wondering when you said you're doing the outreach, you're asking them to update an existing post that they already have, right? So you're not asking them to write another post.
Yeah, it depends really. So some people would prefer writing a new post and incorporating that in a new one as opposed to re-updating one that they've and republishing one that they already have. I was actually surprised. I thought more people would be willing to update an existing one, but more people were more willing to create a new post with a brand new infographic in it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, is if you run into issues with editorial, or, you know, like I've had similar situations where they can't really update very succinctly the post, so it might be easier to just do a new post. So maybe that's playing into it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like I said, they're willing to just create the new post. A lot of the time, they'll actually write the content themselves. And we just send over the infographic. So, but in the case where, like I said, you pitch the existing infographic back to new influencers and different people, we've had a pretty huge uptake on that, and most people are really enthusiastic when it comes to receiving an infographic. One thing I forgot to mention is if you just change the logos at the bottom so that you can include their logo, it's at least branded specifically to that person. So I think a lot of people feel a little bit better about that.
Nice.
Okay, guys, any other questions to each other?
I actually had a question back for you about the featured snippets.
Sure.
Yeah, so we're actually, like, that's part of my strategy for next year, is just getting more featured snippets. What I don't know if you've looked into mobile versus desktop at all. I'm not sure if you mentioned that anywhere, but so I just got a Google Home, right? So I'm trying to see,
Right.
like, I know that the mobile snippets have something to do with ranking on voice, but I guess how would you try to optimize your content so that it appears on a mobile snippet as opposed to a desktop one?
Yeah, typically, I mean, you would go about it pretty much the same way. The only times that I see it being different is in how it's displayed. And so you might see something, frankly, for mobile, you're taking up the entire screen most of the time.
Yeah.
So if you have like a feature snippet table and an image and all that, I mean, it's basically, you don't see anything but that. And so that's pretty good. But also you'll see like different truncation like come into play with mobile versus desktop. So, but honestly, I would do it exactly the same way. I wouldn't think about mobile any differently. I would just do it exactly the same way, and you'll be fine. Like there's just do it exactly the same way. And also just with the Google Home stuff, like, I don't know, like it's cool, and I know we're all talking about it and everything, but I don't worry about it because you're not going to make a transaction there. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I have a question to all of you. What do you think, how the visual content will increase its presence in 2017 in digital marketing?
I can take that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that videos, of course, is going to be really, really big. So we're going to see a huge rise in the use of videos. We're also going to start seeing more of these augmented reality, virtual reality apps coming along. But at the same time, we just shouldn't forget about the basics, like making sure you have, a really visual landing page, especially if you're in an industry like travel and eating. Like people, like they look with their eyes, they eat with their eyes, they fall in love with their eyes, right? We are so visual, so we want them to have that already, and you'd be surprised how many don't have that a lot. So I think it's just thinking about the basics, like how do you make it more visual, how do you go to video, and then how do you think of more engaging interactive experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like right now, I'm really liking like Facebook Canvas ads. It's so immersive, and I love when you do it. I was looking at one for I think it was Burberry or something like that, and it had like their scarves, and then if you pan to the left and the right, you can see the rest of them. Like you're in the store looking, right on your phone. I saw some with Carnival Cruises, or it was almost like you could take the cruise, right? Like, so it would switch between, it was like a story, right? And so you would switch between video, and you would go to the location and you're scrolling through. It's very immersive, very interactive. And I see that, that's just going to keep getting better and better. The other thing to remember though is, it's always, fun to talk about that kind of stuff, right? And then be like, okay, and then video, we're gonna do all this stuff, but there's an expense to that. So sometimes, something as simple as an animated GIF is cheap to make, and it's very effective if you do it right. So you've got to think about allocating your marketing budget properly. Everything can't be like this major interactive thing, or you're just not going to be able to produce much content on most budgets, right? So if you have a smaller budget, don't fret and be like, hey, I can't, make my own chatbot. Like, you can still do small things, even charts, graph studies, GIFs, little things like that can still go a long way in telling a visual story without having an enterprise budget.
It's free to make your chatbot, by the way, on things like Microsoft.
Yeah. That's true. I've played with that before. It's quite fun.
Yeah, and I mean, like, look at how Apple has come through, right? Like, the Mac was a revolutionary product, but a lot of what appeals to people now is the design, the aesthetic of a certain product or of the look of something, right? We tend to buy it. I know, like, the saying is, don't judge a book by its cover, but we, like, as tech advances, like, we continue to just choose things based on the way it looks. So visual content in itself, and just like how you present your content is something that's going to be continue to be really, really important.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for your presentations and for staying with us. We hope that you are going to join our very last session as visitors. So it is starting already now. And thank you again for being with Digital Olympus, and hope to hear from you soon. Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
And tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.